Welcome back, fellow shop rats. It's a Talk About It Tuesday, and today's subject matter is, well, it's probably a delicate subject matter and one that we have to handle tactfully and with integrity and sensitivity, and or maybe not. Today, we're going to talk about so many of the, to choose my words carefully here, dumb questions I see people asking in car forums online. Let's talk about it. I'm Mike.
This is My Cars Shop.
Let me say right up front that I do understand that people don't know what they don't know until they know it. And the only way we learn something is by learning it. And when we haven't learned it yet, we're not going to know it. However, there are times I see questions asked online and I think maybe there needs to be a test for people to own and work on their own classic car. Maybe they really do know better and they're just throwing these questions out there just to see what kind of reactions they can get. But if you drill into it, yes, there is some of that. But if you drill into it, a lot of times people really are rather ignorant when it comes to just basic things about cars, particularly classic cars, but cars in general. Now, I'm not here to ridicule anybody. I'm not here to put down somebody's lack of knowledge on something. Like I said, we don't know what we don't know until we know it. But there are some times that I just feel like you should at least know how to check the oil. You should at least know how to check your tire pressure. You should at least know how to tighten out a lug nut. If you're going to attempt to work on a car, you should know what a screwdriver is. You should know what a wrench is. You should know what a ratchet is. And I'm not saying some of these people don't know these things, but sometimes I think all they know how to do is chew on the edge of the workbench. Again, I'm not one to ridicule somebody else's lack of education and lack of knowledge, but more I'm sharing with you my own disbelief at things that people don't know. Now, if you're not a car person, I can understand not knowing that. And I do know people who are into cars who don't have a huge amount of knowledge of things automotive, and they always ask questions and they want to learn, and I'm happy to teach. And that's not the stuff I'm talking about. Like I said, questions like how do I check the oil and where do I put in the gas? And maybe you should just take it to the shop and not attempt some of these things yourself. There are guys like me and others who are happy to help out and happy to even do the work if you pay us within reason. But what scares me is someone with that lack of knowledge diving into doing some of the work that they want to do on these cars. And quite frankly, it's terrifying. I know I read a post the other day, and this was legitimate. I was you putting a set of wheels on, say it was a Challenger. I don't remember the vehicle, it doesn't matter. And he was using Krager wheels, and so they require a deep sleeve on it to hold that mag wheel onto the car. Legitimate. He had the right style of lug nut. But he kept saying that he put all the lug nuts on and he tightened them all down and they kept coming loose and he kept tightening them down. And what do you guys do? Do you put Loctite on them? What do you do to keep these things from falling off? And so guys were going down the rabbit hole of saying, well, you got to make sure you properly torque them, tighten them down, drive the car a mile or two, stop, torque them down again, going through all of legitimate answers only to find out that he used metric lug nuts on an American car that uses standard threads. Now, again, you don't know, you don't know. I get that. But there comes a point at which I say, do you know how to use Google to find out the right parts? Do you go to your local auto parts and ask questions of the parts guy saying, okay, I've got these Krager wheels that I bought online and I need lug nuts to fit my 70 Challenger? Most parts people, even the people that just work off the computers and don't know a whole lot, know how to look things up and find you the right part for a 70 Challenger, and they're going to help you spec that out. So these are the kinds of things that I run into on a regular basis, and I don't ever want to diss anybody's lack of knowledge, but I can't live in denial of my own disbelief about some of this stuff also. In the Mopar world, another one that always gets me is anytime somebody has an electrical problem, they'll ask a question, and it's a legitimate question, not an ignorant question even, and they'll get a whole series of answers, and half of them will be you got to replace the ballast resistor. I'm having problems with my left front tire going flat, and oh, you need a new ballast resistor. My radio isn't working properly in my car. Oh, you need a new ballast resistor. My charging system isn't charging the car properly. Oh, it's the ballast resistor. My car runs and dies and then starts right back up again, and oh, that's the ballast resistor. Well, everything I just said, I promise you the answer for that is not the ballast resistor, but that does seem to be the pat answer that come from people who only have a limited amount of knowledge because their uncle's second cousin's nephew had one time, and it was a ballast resistor problem that caused whatever and whatever. Another one that really gets me is often when I see somebody asking a legitimate question, I will once in a great while, I don't very often, but once in a great while, I will try to offer some insight on it, but I'll usually ask some questions before I start throwing answers. I won't get into details on what the thread was, but it was one recently where I thought I was pretty sure I knew what the guy was dealing with, and all I asked for was a picture. He had shared some pictures of some parts, and I said, "Can you take that same picture and back up? I think I know what might be going on, but I need to see the whole assembly before I can answer." I think on my one answer about asking for a different picture, I got flamed for not knowing what I was talking about. I got corrected. I got told what the problem was. Um, I mean, it literally went on for like 30 responses. Now I'm not new to the internet. Okay. I blow that crap off most of the time. Once in a while, somebody gets under my skin, and I will admit that I do have a little fun. There was a whole other long thread of answers answering the guy's question, and I thought to myself, is anybody even listening to what the guy is asking? Is anybody even listening to what I asked? Or is everybody just going to jump to conclusions about what it should be and what it shouldn't be? And in this one particular thread, this guy kept coming in and touting how he had almost 50 years experience as a Mopar mechanic and he knows what he's talking about. Blah 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 blah. He does know what he's talking about. Nobody else does, and he doesn't know what other people are talking about either. And again, it's not my first day on the internet. What concerns me, and the reason I'm doing this as a talk about it, is I know everybody here can relate. But what concerns me is it seems like we've turned into a world where we're not listening to people. We don't know how to communicate on a personal level. And we want to appear as self proclaimed experts, and I'm sure I do it too. I know I used to do it a lot more than I do as I've gotten older. And therefore, we go off half cocked without really having enough information to be able to provide some reasonably intelligent answer. So let me bring those three things back to the original topic here of people asking really ignorant questions that make you question whether or not they should even have a classic car. This is what bothers me about that. I think it's so easy for us to run to the internet and ask questions, but not surround ourselves in our local community with people who can support and help us. I know there's my buddy John, whom you've seen here on the channel a few times. I've done some work for. He's got the '66 Belvedere, and I've done some paint work on his diesel truck and so forth. And one of the things he says is he likes to hang around with me because I'm an old fart and I've got a lot of experience from back in the day. I respect that. And this is where my serious, I've been being kind of smart alecky in a lot of this, but this is where my serious issues come is, are we so devoid of face-to-face relationships with people in our lives? Do we not have people in our community that we can hang out with, hang out in the shop with, or a buddy we can call to come over and say, hey, I've got this issue on my car and I really don't know a whole lot about it. Would you be willing to give me a hand? And then we could learn from somebody who's got more experience and more knowledge. I don't know. I think we tend to run to the online communities. They have their place. I use them, but I think we tend to run to those things as our first choice, rather than taking the time it takes to develop connection with people around us who can truly be helpful and truly understand what we're trying to accomplish, and even the basic questions. The second thing, again, as I've already said, is I have a real problem because people don't listen. And maybe that's why people don't have those personal connections in their communities or in their local areas. But there are car clubs. It wouldn't take you long to make a connection with people around you who know people. If they're not the ones, they will know people who are into something like what you're into. And if the people that they know aren't into exactly what you're into, they're going to know somebody. Those people are going to know somebody who is. So I'm going to give you a real life example here. We recently, as you saw on the channel, many of you, we took the 26 Oakland back to the original homestead, where it was when my great grandfather owned it. We took it back to the dealership where he purchased it brand new. One of the things that I don't think I talked about in the video was the connections with people in the local community. Part of the plan for that car is every summer it's going to go spend part of its time. We're going to trailer it up and leave it for family there to enjoy it. And then in the fall, we're going to bring it back here again for us to enjoy, but also for me to work on and fix whatever broke and stuff like that. One big concern that I have with that is a car of that vintage is a bit unique and not easy to work on. And so I really wanted to make a connection with somebody that I felt comfortable with, who I knew had the old school skills. I was very fortunate, and he does watch the channel. I won't call him by name. I was very, very fortunate to meet up with this guy. My dad actually went to school with him. And there's just an instant recognition of people with experience and knowledge. Two sentences, and you automatically are already resonating and knowing this person knows what they're doing, this person knows what they're talking about. Personal connection makes all the difference in the world. Like recognizes like, right? And I think now, granted, I have a YouTube channel and a lot of connections and stuff like that, but I still think when I go back in the day when I bought my Model A, I didn't know much about Model A's way back in the '90s, and I started asking around. I started asking at the auto parts, who's the guy around? Who's the A guy? Oh, guy at the auto parts, Grant. Grant, I can say Grant because Grant's passed on now. Grant's the guy. You got to talk to Grant. Well, I knew Grant. He was a customer at the dealership. I didn't know him well, but I knew him. I knew where he lived. So I went and knocked on the door. Mike. He knew me by name because of the dealership. Mike, what's up? I said, well, I bought a 31 Ford Model A. You did? Well, let's sit down and let's talk. And that first time, I learned in 2 hours more about Model A's than I ever knew in my life, of course, because I didn't know a whole lot. And I learned more than anything as he was telling his stories is this is my go-to guy. This is the guy that I can go to get my questions answered when I run into something. And so I would work on the car for long periods of time doing what I was doing, a lot of body and paint work on the car, but also have mechanical things to deal with. And I'd run into Grant here and there. And how's that Model A coming? What are you working on? I tell him the story. Okay, what about this? Did you check this? Did you look at that? Yep, I did. And then if I couldn't figure something out, hey, Grant, I got an issue. I don't think he ever actually had to come to the house. He was able to tell me everything I needed to know, um, just by asking questions and me answering those questions and him pointing me in the directions that I needed to be pointed in. I think we all need a guru. We all need a go-to guy. We all need somebody that we can bounce stuff off of. And the online forums should never be, in my opinion, and with that and 25 cents, you'll have a quarter. Um, should never be the first place we go. just think about that as you're working on the things you're working on. Develop relationships. I know through YouTube, I've developed relationships with people I highly respect, whose opinions I highly value, whose expertise I will seek out, like Just Mopar Joe and the Dodge Whisperer and a few others, who are people who have high levels of experience. And even though those guys are quite a bit younger than me, I have nothing but the utmost respect for their knowledge. I also have guys locally that are good friends that I'll call up and say, hey, this. And they'll call me and say, hey, this. And we can talk through stuff and bounce ideas off of each other, or maybe say, not sure about that one. You mind if I run over? Let's take a look. So those are my thoughts. I know I started out a little snarky. I was just doing that more for the attention getting, I suppose. But seriously, a serious topic. Um, why are we not seeking out people around us to help us with these things, rather than going online and just asking ignorant questions? And um, I don't know. I think without that personal relationship, without that personal connection, remember, ignorance is just merely a lack of knowledge. It's not stupidity. But I think without personal connection and somebody who knows us and who understands us, we're doing ourselves a great disservice. And it's too bad. If our world really has become this disconnected, maybe we really do need to unplug the internet. Well, those are my thoughts for today. I know it was rather disjointed and random, but it's a talk about it Tuesday, and that's pretty much what I do. I got to clean a bench. This is a flipping mess. I'm still cleaning up after the big trip and getting things put away. So I'm going to get after that, and we will catch you on the next one. We really will. I promise. I'll be here. I hope that you will too. Remember, with episodes like this is my opinion, and it should be yours. Rock!